In 1950, above the Balkan Mountains, arms dealer Anatol is flying in his private plane. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise. When he turns around, his assistant unexpectedly explodes, tearing a hole in the wall of the aircraft. The plane begins to descend rapidly. Anatol rushes to the cockpit and gives the pilot some advice on how to regain control. One of the engines catches fire, causing the pilot to panic. He shouts at Anatol, blaming him for ignoring his earlier warnings not to fly that day. The pilot threatens to report him to the authorities if they survive. In response, Anatol fires him on the spot and activates the ejector seat, taking control of the plane himself. The aircraft eventually crashes in a cornfield. News outlets soon report Anatol's passing. However, Anatol's soul finds itself in the afterlife next to his grandmother, who doesn't seem to recognize him. A divine court debates whether he is worthy of peace. But suddenly, Anatol wakes up in the plane wreckage, badly injured but still alive. He walks through the cornfield and disrupts a live television broadcast where the pilot is being interviewed. This revelation forces newspapers to update their headlines. Anatol is alive. Back at his mansion, a team of nurses cares for him while he recovers. Elsewhere, a secret organization led by a man named Excalibur is discussing Anatol. He is wanted for various forms of corporate wrongdoing. The group decides it's finally time to bring him down. Once Anatol regains some strength, he calls for a meeting with his daughter Liesel, who is a nun. He announces that she is now the sole heir to his fortune, bypassing her 9 brothers. These sons, mostly adopted orphans, watch from the balcony. Liesel hasn't seen her father in 6 years and is suspicious of his sudden generosity. Anatol asks her to carry on his legacy if something happens to him. He introduces her to a collection of boxes that contain the details of his latest plan, which he calls the Phoenician scheme. Before he can go too far, Liesel interrupts him with a painful question: what happened to her mother? Rumors say Anatol harmed all his past wives. He denies these claims and insists he cared deeply for Liesel's mother. Liesel is still hurt by the fact that he abandoned her at a convent as a child. Ignoring her concerns, Anatol continues his presentation. The boxes contain plans for infrastructure projects and covert business deals involving shipping, mining, railroads, banking, and other sectors. He intends to take control of industries using unethical labor practices. Their conversation is cut short when one of the boys fires a flaming arrow that lands on a box. The butler quickly extinguishes the fire, and Anatol leaves to discipline his sons. Liesel then notices a young man named Bjorn, Anatol's new assistant. When Anatol returns, Liesel asks about a mysterious final box. He calls it the Gap and says they'll discuss it later. He urges Liesel to leave the church and work with him, but she remains hesitant. At lunch, Anatol has Bjorn take a lie detector test to ensure he's trustworthy. Over the next few days, Anatol continues unpacking the contents of the boxes while Liesel studies them. She is disturbed by the nature of the plans, but also tempted by the idea of using the inheritance for good. Meanwhile, Bjorn begins tutoring the boys, and Liesel observes how emotionally neglected they are. One morning, Anatol tells Liesel that her mother didn't pass the way official records claim. He believes his half-brother Nubar is responsible. Although they dislike each other, Anatol and Nubar still collaborate on certain business projects. Liesel decides to get closer to Nubar in hopes of exposing him and agrees to join her father's plan. Meanwhile, Excalibur unveils a strategy involving the bashable rivet, a common construction part. By inflating its price, he hopes to sabotage Anatol's entire operation. That night, Anatol receives word of the market manipulation and wakes Liesel. All construction costs are rising, and he suspects foul play. They board his private plane and prepare to visit every partner to renegotiate terms. As a backup plan, he's hired individuals to destroy his mansion for the insurance. Excalibur tracks Anatol's movements and notes that repeated attempts on his life have caused serious injuries. During the flight, Liesel notices they're carrying a strange box. Anatol reveals it contains explosives but refuses to discuss his past use of them. Bjorn is tested again and put in charge of a bag full of cash. He and Liesel start bonding. He admits he's not religious and compliments her appearance. As they prepare to land, Anatol reveals he doesn't have a passport and considers himself a global outsider. A sudden noise reminds Liesel of the earlier explosion, and she begins to pray. They reach a mountain where a railway tunnel is under construction. As they observe the work, Anatol tells Liesel that he's kept track of her life through his network. Suddenly, armed riders arrive. Anatol tells the driver to retrieve the explosives, but the driver is quickly taken down. Before the situation escalates further, Prince Farouk and his guard arrive and scare off the attackers. Farouk flirts with Liesel and offers her a fancy knife. In return, Anatol gives him a grenade as a gift. They tour the tunnel, which shakes as they walk through. Liesel is concerned, but Anatol assures her it's safe. Both Farouk and Bjorn offer comfort, but she declines. At the end of the tunnel, they meet financiers Leland and Reagan. who are upset about changes to their contract. After a heated argument, Anatole proposes a basketball match to settle the matter. The brothers will face Anatole and Farouk, who's never played before. While they wait, Bjorn convinces Liesel to try a drink and keeps flirting. The game begins, but Farouk struggles. Anatole, losing hope, calls Liesel over to share the story of her birth. He tells her he regrets sending her to the convent and reveals she's named after his grandmother. She was the only child he truly wanted to raise. For the final shot, Anatole makes a wager. If Farouk scores, the brothers accept the original contract with a 10% contribution to the gap. If he misses, Anatole forfeits all his money. Farouk makes the shot. Later, Anatole dreams of bringing a deer to his 3 wives. When he cuts it open, coins pour out. One of the women claims Liesel isn't his daughter. He wakes suddenly and tells Liesel that she has his eyes, just like her uncle. She looks at a photo of Nubar and notices the resemblance. The phone rings. It's Bob, a project partner. Anatole lies, claiming the brothers agreed to cover the full gap. Liesel scolds him for being dishonest, but he deflects, calling it strategy. Just then, Bjorn discovers a timed device set to go off in 18 minutes. Anatole says to ignore it, they'll land in 10. That night, they visit Bob's club. Anatole gives Bob a grenade, and Liesel has another drink. During dinner, Bob receives an anonymous note trying to pressure him into covering the gap. He recognizes Anatole's handwriting and confronts him. The argument reveals that the others only agreed to a small share. Suddenly, a paramilitary group storms the club. Bob steps out to confront them. When he is targeted, Anatole shields him and takes the hit. Luckily, some papers in his pocket lessen the impact, and he survives. Anatole removes the bullet from Bob and asks him to keep it. Impressed, Bob agrees to help cover part of the financial gap. Sometime later, the group boards a ship to meet Captain Marty, another part of Anatole's grand plan. Marty is aware of the situation but insists he won't help financially. Anatole claims he's only there symbolically and offers Marty a hand grenade as a gift. Suddenly, Anatole collapses from blood loss and has another vision. In this vision, a young version of Liesel appears in a courtroom, describing the traumatic night her mother passed away and how her father told her she wouldn't live at home anymore. Anatole realizes he's the one on trial and finds himself in shackles before waking up. A sailor is performing a blood transfusion between Marty and Anatole. As he regains consciousness, Anatole begins telling Liesel new information about her mother. He reveals that her mother had several affairs, including one with his brother Nubar. Enraged by this, Anatole had written a letter to Nubar pretending to be his wife, ending the relationship and claiming she was now with the secretary. Anatole believes this may have driven Nubar to a violent act. When Liesel asks if he ever truly loved her mother, Anatole admits he was only fond of her. Liesel slaps him. Anatole apologizes, surprised to hear that Liesel forgives him, saying she always expected disappointment from him. Later, Anatole presents a new proposal to Marty, but the captain tosses it out the window. Tensions rise, and Anatole pulls the pin from the grenade, causing the group to laugh at the absurdity. Eventually, Marty agrees to cover part of the remaining financial burden. Meanwhile, Excalibur receives a report tracking Anatole's movements, confirming there's a spy. Later, Anatole meets with his second cousin Hilda and proposes to her, clarifying that Liesel will remain the sole heir. Hilda accepts the ring without responding directly. She then tells Liesel an old family story about a petty feud between their grandfathers that fractured the family. Despite Anatole's pleas, Hilda refuses to help financially. Liesel questions her about her mother's death and whether Nubar is her real father, but Hilda only knows the rumors. On a plane, Anatole opens an emergency letter and learns that a special government order has been passed to stop him. He must be home with a notary by noon the next day or face imprisonment. While Anatole talks to the pilot about changing course, Liesel notices Bjorn tapping his fingers and realizes it's Morse code. Their conversation is cut short when Anatole triggers the emergency alarm. He's discovered that the pilot has been poisoned, leaving him to fly the plane. After ejecting the pilot, a fighter jet attacks and damages the aircraft, forcing it to crash in a forest. Everyone survives, but Bjorn's bag bursts open, revealing his identity as a spy. He drops his awkward demeanor and admits he was just following orders. Anatole tries to fight him, but Bjorn easily overpowers him. Anatole walks away in shame, and Bjorn confesses he's willing to change sides because he's developed feelings for Liesel. Suddenly, they hear Anatole shouting. He's trapped in quicksand. He asks them not to help so he can prove himself, but Bjorn volunteers anyway. Liesel kisses him before he jumps in with a vine tied around him. Anatole loses consciousness and has another vision, this time making a controversial request to a higher power. He wakes up to find Bjorn has saved him. Anatole wonders how Bjorn passed the polygraph, and Bjorn explains he was trained to deceive it. That night, the trio takes shelter in the wrecked plane and shares stories about their difficult childhoods. Liesel decides she doesn't want to work with her father anymore and wants to return to her spiritual roots. The next morning, they're picked up by Sergio and his team. Upon arrival, the Mother Superior informs Liesel that she wasn't meant for convent life and releases her from it. Anatole thanks her with a generous donation and talks about his visions, wondering if baptism could give him peace. He then takes Liesel to a safe containing a box left by his father's notary. Liesel promises to open it later. During dinner, Anatole explains that the remaining investors will meet at the Desert Palace Hotel for the unveiling of the Phoenician scheme. To improve their chances, he plans to marry Hilda and be baptized, hoping to gain official backing from the church. He also wants all his boys baptized. He convinces Bjorn to introduce him to Excalibur. Anatole promises he won't let Excalibur win. At the hotel, Anatole, Liesel, Bjorn, and Sergio ride the elevator, where Anatole recognizes the operator as an assassin. Everyone prepares for a fight, but the man ends his life with poison instead. Before entering the office, Anatole asks Liesel to let him adopt her if it turns out she isn't his biological daughter. She agrees. Inside, they meet Nubar. When Anatole offers a grenade, Nubar declines, saying he already has one. Nubar confirms that Liesel's mother had an affair with the secretary, who is likely her real father. He denies any involvement in her death. An argument breaks out between the brothers. Anatole uses a polygraph to prove he didn't harm any of his wives. Liesel opens the box from the safe and finds family photos, letters, poison gas capsules, her grandfather's ashes, and a key. Nubar announces he's leaving the project and only came out of curiosity. In the elevator, Anatole tells Liesel and Bjorn he's giving up all his wealth to cover the financial gap and even plans to compensate the workers, hoping it brings his life meaning. Liesel is proud, saying she never needed the fortune. During the meeting, Anatole announces this change of heart. A hidden microphone allows Excalibur to hear everything. The investors agree to proceed, and Anatole reveals a model of the project. Just then, a servant informs him that Nubar is looking for him. In a private room, Nubar says he wants to handle things himself. Anatole misinterprets this as business talk, but Nubar reveals he sent the assassins. He tries to strangle Anatole, and a chaotic fight breaks out. They tumble down the stairs and hit each other with random objects. Nubar grabs one of the poison capsules, throws it at Anatole, but it bounces harmlessly. Anatole throws it back and runs. Returning to the meeting, Anatole watches Nubar appear on the diorama. Nubar prepares to use his grenade, but Anatole urges him to talk. Nubar has a change of heart after recalling family memories. He uses the grenade on himself, destroying the diorama. In one final vision, Anatole and Liesel return the ashes to the safe. Later, Anatole lives a modest life with Liesel and the boys, now receiving the care they lacked before. Bjorn has left Excalibur and works at a school. Hilda has annulled her marriage and opened a camp. Anatole runs a restaurant with Liesel helping as a waitress. Hilda returns the ring, and Bjorn uses it to propose to Liesel.